All right, everyone. We are going to talk about what can sometimes be one of the most intimidating things about being a mentor, and that is the first time or the first few times that you have a brand new dealer. And this is so important. If you have the potential to have a small impact on somebody who's been around for 3 years, and you have the potential to have a medium sized impact on someone who's been around for 9 months. But you will be one of the primary factors in shaping the future of a new dealer. So if you do a good job here, everything will be better and everything will be easier going forward. And it's one of those things you can only make a first impression one time. So we want to get it right. So I wanted to take some time and go over how I interact with brand new dealers. And if you follow this basic outline, you'll be able to get through the first call and you'll plan your next few calls with them and you'll be off to a good start working with them. So, when should you reach out to your new dealer? This is how the process works. You will get an email as soon as a lease is uploaded in your territory. During the recruiting process, it's really completely up to the recruiter to handle things. Over time, you might develop a rapport with them, and if they need you to help out in some way, maybe reach out, make a phone call or something, you can do that. But for the most part, your job with a new dealer begins when a lease is uploaded. So when you get that, it's going to have their name, it's going to have their phone number, their location, all of that information. And on that first day, like if you get this on a Friday, really that Friday, you should be reaching out to them. And let's say it's late at night. I mean, don't call somebody at 2 a.m, right? Then call them the very next day. But you should really never be going over 24 hours before making first contact. If for some reason you are so busy that you're unable to have this first call, because I should warn you, this first call takes me somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half. So you are going to need to set aside some time in order to be able to do this effectively. But even if you're not able to have that full conversation on the first call, at the very, very least, you must reach out to them and let them know who you are, why you're calling them, and set up a time to talk with them. So all of this should be done that first 24 hours. If it's going to be longer than that, maybe you're sick or in the hospital, who knows, reach out to your manager and have your manager make that opening call for you. At the very least, the manager can reach out, introduce himself, and let them know that, hey, your mentor is so-and-so. He or she's going to be reaching out to you soon. Expect a call in the next couple of days, and go from there. But this should be quite irregular. On the most part, you should be having this conversation with your new dealer, and you should be doing it within the 24 hours. Okay. The primary goal in this first contact is you want to bridge a connection with this new dealer. And that doesn't mean you need to be best friends. It doesn't mean that you need to be on a first name basis with all their children and stuff like that. But you need to reach out. Here's the thing. Somebody probably just made one of the scariest decisions they've made in years, right? They just signed a lease and they don't really know all that much about Mattress by Appointment. Yeah, sure, they've worked in part with a recruiter and they're probably hopeful that things are going to be good, but they're also probably a little intimidated. And so we don't want them sitting there wondering what's going to happen. It's incumbent upon you to reach out and bridge that gap. You need to be warm. You need to be receptive. You need to find a way to connect with them. And that doesn't mean you just make up stuff, right? If they're into football and you're into baseball, don't pretend like you're into football. Find things where you can connect with them. And that doesn't mean just putting on a show for them. It means having a real conversation, finding out about them. I like to ask people questions like, how did you get into Mattress by Appointment? You just see an ad? Did you just get laid off your job? Like, what brought you here? And get them talking. And they'll often tell you about their previous work experience. If that overlaps with you, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. They might tell you about their family situation, their previous business experience. All of those things are going to be valuable. So you're making a connection with them. And then you also want to help set the stage, because the process between signing a lease and getting your first set of mattresses in can be one of the most difficult times for a new dealer. There's a lot of governmental red tape they might need to jump through. There's some hassles that maybe they've never experienced before, and maybe they don't even know what they don't know. So having somebody like you who can guide them through the process will be very helpful. On this first call, I really try to get two things out of it beyond making the connection. I want to prepare them to have a legitimate business, and I want to prepare them to accept money. If somebody wants to give them money, I want them to be able to take it. If I can set a path for them to accomplish those two things after the first call, then I will have considered it successful. And then the final thing is I want to set a plan for the future. I don't want to just hang up with them and they go, okay, well, is that it? I want to let them know what things are going to look like their next 2, 3, 4 weeks, what they can come to expect. And so we're going to go into a little bit more detail on a couple of those so that you know what I'm talking about. So when I say, and I just divide this kind of in my mind, I don't have an outline or anything when I talk to new dealers. This is just how I have come to do it. The first kind of segment I label as preparing to have a legitimate business. And the way that I keep track of these things in my mind is I think from the biggest to the smallest. So I'm going to go from like what's required on a federal level to a state level to the county level down to the city level. And by doing that, I never skip over any of these things. So the first thing that I'll talk through, and I often tell the people, because especially if they're coming with business experience, like, hey, you might have already done some of this. You might already know all this. That's fine. Just let me get through this just so I can make sure that I've told you everything that you need. And if you've already done half of it, great. We're off to a good start. So first, I'll talk about getting an employer identification number, sometimes called an EIN, sometimes called a FEIN for federal employer's identification number. And you can get this online from the IRS. It takes about 5 minutes to do. So this is often an easy step. I like for them to start here for two reasons. One, it's an easy thing that they can have checked off their list very quickly. I want them to have some immediate wins. Second, if you have your EIN, it will make everything else in this process easier to do. If you don't, sometimes you'll need to be able to fill out 90% of a form, and you have to wait till you get that number before you can fill in the rest. So at the federal level, you want that EIN. At the state level, and this sometimes has different names, so especially if you're just starting out, you might not know how each state labels things, and that's okay. Your goal here is to give the dealer a basic understanding of what they need to do. And if they need to Google it or you need to help them Google it, you can do that in the future. But at the state level, in any state that charges sales tax, they're going to have something like a seller's permit or a resale license, or something like that. And basically what this is the business is telling the state, hey, I'm going to charge sales tax in your state. You're giving me permission to hold on to it for a little bit, and then I'll remit it to you later. And so this is required. Now, you're not always going to have this. For example, Montana does not have sales tax, so they don't have an equivalent to a seller's permit. And if they don't have to do it, great. We're already past this step. When you get a seller's permit or when you get a resale license, you're going to have a number. And this is the number that has to go on the resale certificate that every new dealer is going to upload into the system. Leslie will go through these and check them off. So this is a crucial first step. If this is not done, your dealer will not get credentials to log in to the sales portal. And because of that, they will not be able to place an order. So you want to focus on getting this done right away. I should note that if you're in a state that doesn't have sales tax, you still have to upload something into that resale certificate file. What you're going to do is you're going to want to have a letter where basically the dealer is saying, hey, in the state of Montana, we do not have sales tax, so there's no seller's permit or resale license that's required, and put their name and their business address and maybe have them sign it, upload that for Leslie, and that'll kickstart the process to getting their portal open. So we talked about the federal level, the seller's permit or resale license is at the state level, and then often at the county level, not always, but often there's something called a DBA or a fictitious business name, or sometimes even license. And basically, this is just you telling, let's say you're going to run a sole proprietorship, which is basically the default business structure. If you do nothing, if you have one person, if you have multiple people, then it would be a general partnership. But in any of those cases, if your business is something different than your last name, like in our case, a business is going to be Mattress by Appointment or Mattress by Appointment Montclair, then you need to get approval to do that. Basically, it's a form, usually a fee, and sometimes running a notification in a local newspaper for a few weeks. So encourage your people to get this done. Not the most important thing, but it does need to get done at some point, so you might as well do it here in the beginning. And then finally, at the city level, most cities are going to have some sort of business license. This is usually where they check to make sure that your zoning is fine. Usually they'll charge you a little bit of a fee, things like that, in order to basically give you the privilege to run a business in their city. And you're going to want to get this started because sometimes city governments are pretty slow to act. And so better to get this started as quickly as you possibly can. So federal, state, county, city, if you do all those things, you'll now, in most cases, you'll be prepared to legally operate a business. Sometimes, like in the state of California, there are a couple extra hoops that you have to jump through. For example, you have a mattress recycling fee that you have to sign up for, and you have a specific license in order to be able to sell furniture. So in California, you have 2 extra steps in this process, but this is pretty rare. For the most part, if you follow this federal, state, county, city guideline, you'll get them through everything that they need. So that's the first half of what I want them to take from this call, what I want them to prepare for. The second thing is I want them to prepare to accept money. If they get mattresses in and somebody's crazy enough to give them money, I want them to be able to take that money. So I always talk about 3 things at this point. The first is they'll say, hey, do you have a business checking account? And sometimes if they've already gone through some of those previous steps, then they will. But a lot of times they don't. And I usually encourage them to get a business checking account. And a lot of times they'll ask if they have to go with Bank of America. The New Dealer Checklist used to suggest that people call someone at Bank of America and get set up. I always let them know you don't have to. Go with somebody who's both local and you feel comfortable with. Maybe you don't have a Bank of America in your city. It would be kind of silly to sign up with them if you didn't have access to them. So if you want to sign up with a local credit union or a local bank, go right ahead. Fine with me. But let's get their business checking set up. And another thing that's important, people sometimes ask, well, why do I need a business checking account? Like, it doesn't really get me anything extra. Well, there's a lot of dealers who kind of start this business as a hobby or a side gig. And you're going to find that cash flow is one of the most important things that will help you know if they're going to be successful or unsuccessful. And people who merge their money, they treat their business money like their personal cash and vice versa, they often struggle. Sometimes it's very hard for somebody. They sell a brand new mattress, they have $1,000 in their pocket, and then they go to the casino that night or they go to the club that night or anything else. I mean, that money might be gone. And then when it's time to order new mattresses, they don't have any. And you might sometimes be banging your head against the wall wondering like, hey, how did you sell all this stuff? And you have absolutely no money to buy new mattresses. Well, part of it is they're mixing or they're commingling their personal and their business income. So one way that we can help them have a better plan, a better path forward for not doing that is by making sure that they separate their personal checking from their business checking. The next thing that somebody needs to have is some way to process a card. If somebody wants to pay with a debit card or a credit card, they need some way to do that. So that's the name in the industry for that service that's being offered is merchant services. And the easiest and initially cheapest way to get somebody started is just with Square. I'm going to make another video where I talk about merchant services options and I go into the details of how Square works and how some other things work. But suffice it to say right now that in almost all cases, it's usually best to get people started with Square. And then if they find in the future that it would be advantageous for them to switch to something else, then sure, help them switch to something else. But in the beginning, we want to focus on what can we get done quickly and what can we get done inexpensively. And Square is both of those. Finally, you have your financing options. The new dealer checklist just has Acima and Snap listed, but I'll always tell people they must have at least two. But assuming that you have all three in your state that you're mentoring, you might as well just get them signed up with all three immediately. Ultimately, they're going to need it. Better to have more options than fewer. It's not that much harder. All of those applications are essentially the same. So they might as well just get all of those done as quickly as possible. So, stepping back, a big picture, I call, kind of introduce myself, find out about them, let them know a little bit about me, bridge some gaps there. Then we talk about the two things going forward that I want them to take from this call: preparing to have a legitimate business and then preparing to accept money. And now we've accomplished both of those. They'll probably interrupt you multiple times to tell you what they have done, what they haven't done, stuff like that. That's fine. You can praise them for the things that they have done. Make sure that the things that they haven't done get done, and you can go from there. So the way that I wrap up the call is I want to set a plan for them in the future. And so let me take this as a moment. You will find out some of this throughout the call because some people just volunteer information, and that's good for you. But when I talk about getting to know the dealer, I don't mean getting to know whether they love steak or they're a vegan. And if you find out things like that, great, nothing wrong with that. But what I mean is, if I ask you, or if your manager calls you and say, hey, how many square feet does Joe Bob have? Well, if you just talk to them, you should probably know the answer to that. And they say, okay, 1,500 square feet. Great. Is it more like a square or a rectangle or an L or what? Again, you should have an answer to those things. This is somebody's business. And when I talk about getting to know them, I mean getting to know their future MBA business. Do they have money for their opening package? Are they going to put it on a credit card? Are they going to pay with a personal debit card? Like, what's their plan? So when I say getting to know people, I want to make sure that it's not just at a superficial level. We're talking about it. They're important business things that we're getting to know. And again, you're going to find out things about their personal life also, but make sure that you find out the business relevant information as well. Okay. So back to setting a plan for the future. I will use this as an opportunity to introduce the new dealer training call. And depending on when somebody signs up, this could be anywhere from later that day to 2 weeks from now. So you're going to have to play it by ear. Not everybody is going to be the same. Somebody might sign up Monday night and they're hopping on the very next Tuesday to get on that call. Somebody else, they might have signed up Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, and they're going to have to wait 2 weeks before they can have their call. But we're going to talk about it. I'm going to say, hey, block out, an hour or so from your schedule on next Tuesday, and let's get you on this call. The next thing that I want to do is I'm going to tell them about the 2 next calls that they are going to have with me. And a lot of times I'll set up a time, but basically I want this to be a few days out. And this is going, when I have these calls, depends on how quickly they did the previous steps. Some people will be mostly done and they just need to cross a few T's and dot a few I's and they're ready to go. For that person, I might talk about advertising and sales 3 days later, 5 days later. Other people, they'll take a month to get set up. And for them, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to be talking about how to advertise a month before they ever even think about placing an opening order. For them, my next call is probably going to be to check on them and see how things are going with them. But when we get to the point where somebody is basically ready to go, I tell them, hey, what I like to do is I'll have 2 calls with people and we're going to separate them out. So the first call, we're going to talk about advertising. We're going to talk about how to advertise, what to say when we advertise, how much it costs to advertise. We're going to do things like that. And as part of that, we're going to talk about setting an appointment. If somebody calls you and says, hey, do you sell mattresses? I'm going to tell you what to say to them. So I'll explain to them that that's the first call, and that's usually a 30 to 45 minute phone call. And then the second call is, hey, how to sell mattresses. Fine. You set an appointment with somebody, they decided to show up, they walk in the door, and now what the heck do you do? And I'm going to go through that with them. And again, that's probably 45 minutes to an hour right there. And they've gotten some of this on the new dealer training call, but it's your job as a mentor to connect with them. There's just no way, those new dealer training calls, sometimes they're really great, but it's still like trying to drink out of a fire hydrant. And it's important for you to slow down and go through the core components of the business. And those core components are going to be, hey, are you advertising and are you selling when people come in? So I split those up into 2 calls and we talk about both of them. I'll even do some role playing with them in those opening calls. After that, or sometimes at the same time as doing those, we're going to set up their first order. Now, how do you know when somebody's ready to do their first order? You want them to be basically done with the other things. You know, they should probably have a checking account. They should probably have a sales permit, things like that. And you need to know that they're going to be able to receive the mattresses. If you're talking to them on the 10th of the month, but their lease doesn't execute until the 1st, or maybe they don't even get a key until the 1st, well, it's probably not a good idea to do their opening order on the 10th. You probably need to wait till maybe the 27th in order to do their opening order. So a lot of it's going to depend on them. When do they want to open? When are they able to open? I would encourage you never to place an order for someone who does not have keys, because what in the world are you going to do when they call you and they say, hey, this big truck just showed up, but I'm not able to get these in until tomorrow? I mean, what are they going to do? And that's going to be on you. Unless they just lied to you, that's your fault for not guiding them towards better planning, right? So when they are a real business, when they're able to accept money, when they have keys to their business. Now, let's say they're going to tear out the carpet or they're going to paint or something. Same thing. Don't have them order mattresses and show up when the carpet's still there and they're trying to rip it out. That's not going to help them. Have them get through these things and then they can place their opening order. And I'll make another video. We'll talk about what that opening order should look like. It's the questions that most often come up in that opening order and how to deal with that. But that'll be for a later time. The next thing I'm going to do on this call is I'm going to introduce the manager. So right now, I'm making this in 2019. Right now, I'm the mentor in the West, and Neil's my manager. So I want to set this person up for Neil to be able to reach out to them. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm the mentor in your territory. I work very closely with you. When you have questions, I'm your first line of defense. Call, text, email, anytime, whatever is best for you. And I'm here. But We also have a manager, and he kind of backs me up. So his name's Neil Birnbaum, and he will probably be reaching out to you in the next couple days. Real nice guy. He's been in the business for a long time, not just mattresses, but he's been selling stuff for decades. He has a ton of wisdom. And I'll set that person up for Neil to be able to reach out to them. And you want to do the same thing with your manager, because again, what we want the new dealer to feel like is that they're stepping into a supportive environment. They've already worked with the trainer, now they're connecting with you, the mentor, and we want them to connect with the manager. We want them to feel like there's a whole team behind them that's going to guide them to a successful business. So go ahead and set up your manager for a good call. And then the last thing that I do on this first call is I like to step back and say, hey, normally, this is kind of the end of our first call. We're going to talk in a few days, so don't feel like you need to come up with anything. But a lot of times people, they're kind of nervous or they're excited, but they have maybe some nagging questions, something they feel like, ooh, I should have asked this, or my wife asked me this, or my coworker asked me this, and I don't really know the answer. Do you have any questions like that? Then I can help put to bed for you. And a lot of times they will have questions, not always. And if they don't, they say, hey, that's fine. You're probably going to be about to fall asleep tonight and you'll think of the question, and that's fine. If it's a basic question, just shoot me a text. If you want, you can start taking a note, and maybe on the next call, you'll have 4 or 5 questions and we'll talk through it then. So no pressure, but a lot of times they will have a question. And if they do, this is a good opportunity for you to build some rapport with them. They're probably nervous about something. And if you can kind of put that issue to rest for them, that's going to endear you to them. That's going to take away some of their nerves, some of their pressure. And so I always like to end the call with that. They'll ask the questions, I'll do the answers. And again, this could be 5 minutes, or this could be 5 seconds if they just have no answer, or it could be another 30 minutes. But I will tell you this, if you spend time with your brand new dealers, your job will be so much easier. Because if you turn a brand new dealer into a solid dealer, you probably only need to talk to them 15 minutes a month. But if they're struggling, you're going to constantly be calling them and trying to figure out how you can help them, stuff like that. It's much better to connect with them and equip them early on than try to fix them later in the process. So this video is going to be part of a series. Like I said, we're going to cover some of the things that I talked about here in more detail. But at least for now, this is a good overview of how that very first call can go with your brand new dealers.